There is something we take completely for granted today that ancient humans had to figure out from scratch. Not fire, not tools, not language. Something far more personal than any of those. The question of when a woman's body was ready to have children. Today we have biology textbooks. We have doctors. We have tests and charts and apps on our phones that track cycles to the hour. We understand the entire process so thoroughly that we can predict it, prevent it, and even engineer it. Ancient humans had none of that. They had only what they could observe, what their bodies told them, what the community around them had learned across generations, and what the world outside them showed them every single season. And the answer they arrived at is more sophisticated than most people would ever expect. Let's start with the most obvious signal, the one that could not be hidden, the one that changed everything about how a girl was seen by everyone around her. Puberty. In ancient human communities, puberty was not a private biological event that happened quietly at home. It was a public transformation that the entire group witnessed and responded to. The physical changes that came with it, height, body shape, the beginning of menstruation, were visible signals that every adult in the community had been trained since childhood to recognize and respond to in specific ways. In almost every hunter-gatherer society that anthropologists have studied, the onset of menstruation was one of the most significant events in a person's life. Not something to be hidden or ignored, something to be marked, celebrated, announced to the entire group, because it meant something crucial had changed. In a world where every pregnancy mattered and every new person born was another pair of hands to hunt and gather and survive the next winter, a girl becoming a woman was not a private milestone. It was a community event. Archaeological evidence from sites across Africa, Europe, and the Americas shows elaborate coming-of-age rituals going back tens of thousands of years. Red ochre, the same pigment ancient humans used for the most significant markings in their lives, was used in ceremonies tied to female puberty. Cave paintings that researchers once struggled to interpret have since been understood as records of these transitions. Jewelry and ornaments found buried with young women show that their new status was marked with physical symbols the entire community could see. The body was the announcement, but here is where it gets more complicated and more interesting. Because puberty tells you a girl has entered a new stage. It does not tell you she is ready in the way her community understood readiness. And in ancient human societies, readiness was never just biological. It was social. It was practical. It was about survival. A girl who had just entered puberty in a hunter-gatherer band was not automatically available for pairing. She still had things to learn, skills to master, a status to establish within the group. Ancient human communities that anthropologists have studied in parts of the world where traditional ways have survived longest show a consistent pattern. The gap between a girl's first signs of puberty and her actual pairing with a mate was filled with a period of preparation, of learning, of being watched by the community and assessed for readiness in ways that had nothing to do with her body and everything to do with her ability to survive and contribute. Could she process food? Could she navigate the landscape? Could she make the tools and clothing and shelter that keeping a family alive required? These were not secondary considerations. In a world where failure to prepare food properly could mean illness, where getting lost meant death, where the wrong plant could kill a child, a woman's practical knowledge was as important as her biology. The community watched for both. And then, there was something even more ancient than any of this. Something that operated beneath conscious awareness. Something that modern science has only recently begun to understand properly. Smell. The human body communicates fertility through scent in ways that bypass conscious thought entirely. Studies show that men consistently rate women as more attractive during the most fertile points in their cycle without knowing why. Women during peak fertility unconsciously alter their behavior, their voice, their movement. These signals evolved over millions of years, not for one person to notice, but for an entire community to respond to. Ancient humans living in close quarters, sleeping in the same spaces, sharing the same fires, were constantly surrounded by these signals. They would not have described them the way a scientist would. They would not have had words for pheromones or ovulation cycles, but their bodies were reading those signals constantly, responding to them, acting on information they did not know they were receiving. In some documented hunter-gatherer communities, the moment a woman entered her most fertile period triggered visible shifts in group behavior. Men competed more openly. Disputes over resources increased. The social temperature of the entire group changed in ways that elders recognized and managed through established customs and rules. The group knew, even when no individual could have explained exactly why they knew. And this brings us to perhaps the most surprising part of this entire story. Ancient humans were not just passive receivers of these signals, they developed active systems to manage them, rules about who could pair with whom, ceremonies that formalized transitions, networks of exchange between groups that prevented inbreeding in ways scientists have only recently confirmed through ancient DNA analysis. Research published in the journal Science examined the genetics of ancient humans who lived during the Upper Paleolithic period and found something remarkable. These people were deliberately seeking partners from outside their immediate group. Not randomly, systematically, through networks of exchange that connected multiple bands across wide territories, through ceremonies and rituals that may have looked like early versions of what we now call marriage. They understood that breeding within too small a group produced weaker children. They could see it, generation after generation. The evidence was in the children who were born. And so, they built systems to prevent it. Systems sophisticated enough to leave a genetic signature that scientists can still read in ancient bones 50,000 years later. They did not have genetics. They did not have DNA testing. They did not have any of the scientific framework we use to explain what they were doing. But they were doing it anyway. Because the oldest teacher any human has ever had is not a textbook or a doctor or a biology class. It is watching, surviving, and passing down what you learned to everyone who came after you.